All right, so I have uploaded my chair to 3ds Max, and now what I'm going to be doing is making a movie out of this. I've already created the textures and the lighting, but I want to make a movie, not just a still image. So what I need to do is um, I'm going to minimize all these other things, and I'm going to essentially build a camera and a path for it. So I want to be in my four views here, primarily actually going to be working on the top right here first. And so what I need to do is go ahead and find uh, the object that is a circle. And so you want to go ahead and do that. So you'll notice that there's a lot of other things in here. Um, and you'll notice then in the splines here, I'm going to go ahead and select circle. And you want to do this on the top view. And essentially what you do is you click on the center of the object that you want to rotate around and drag it out. All right, so I'll drag it out. Now remember, I have a limited size plane here, so the bigger the circle, it's going to be rendering a lot of images outside of there. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it within here. You'll still see some of the outside, but that's okay. Now the problem is obviously there's a circle on the floor, and so what you want to do is if you right click on it, you can actually move it. And so I'll right click on it and I'll take this arrow in the other view and I'll just simply move it above the camera. So there is no right or wrong position of this, except that if it's too high, you're going to be seeing a lot of other things. All right, so there it is. It's above it. And so now what I need to do is actually put a camera on here. Now, unfortunately, in 3ds Max, you'll see an icon that is a camera. And we're going to do a target. What that means is that the camera is going to rotate around, or it's going to be on a single focal point. So I'll go ahead and put target. And what I'm going to do is similar to the way that I put the light in, I'll do it from the front view. I could do it from the left view too. And I'm going to click it and then drag it on and point it on my object, right? And so you'll notice I'm pointing it on here. Now, notice what happens though when I'm done with it. On the left-hand side, you're going to see something that says camera and a camera target. So the nice thing is that if I want to move it right now, if I go to my top view, for example, I notice that the camera is not centered. So if I go to target, and then I can just move, you have to be careful what you're selecting here. So target, and then I can, in theory, move the position of where the camera is going, because once you select it as a target, the camera will move, but the position, the target itself, will be constant. Okay, so there it is. Now the problem is it's not attached to the line. If I want to move this line up again, just select it, and if it doesn't automatically give you your features, just click rotate. Move. You'll also notice a lot more things that you can do here, but we're not going to really worry about that for now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my camera, and I need to position it onto this circle. So you'll notice up here that there's something called motion. And so motion is when you want to move things and such. So when things animate. What we're going to do though is we're going to go to assign controller, position. I have my camera selected. Now what I need to do, there's a little check mark on here above it. It says assign controller. And what that means is I'm going to assign the camera to a spline here. Select on here. Now what I need to do is make sure that I hit path constraint, because we're going to put on a path. And then I say okay. And then what I need to do before I do anything else is come down here, and you're going to see add path. And so the camera has been selected. Now I'm going to add it to the circle as a path. So I'll go ahead and select add path, and I'll select the circle, and it should snap right on it. Right now, unfortunately, you don't really see what's happened here until I do this. So typically what you want to do is hit escape, and that kind of kills the command. And instead of perspective down here, I'm going to select cameras. You can have multiple cameras, multiple circles. You can do lines, for example. You could do a line going through an object like an interior, and attach the camera. A little different setup, but hit camera. Now you'll notice on this view, this is actually what the camera sees. So now let's make this our I've clicked on this view. Let's go ahead and select this as our maximum view here. All right. So what we'll do though is test it. I'll go ahead and push on the bottom here. I'll push play, and you'll see that it's rotating around. And I'm not worried about the objects on the background. Now, if I was, let's say for example, I was really upset because I'm seeing these items in the back. A couple things you can do. Obviously, I could make the rectangle bigger, but the other thing you can do is if you select the camera itself, and so here's the camera selected, um, and you'll notice that there's lenses. We see at about a 35 millimeter. So if I was really wanted to, I could try to come in, and so that way I could take this bar, I could rotate around. Oh, I still don't like seeing all that stuff. 85 millimeter. Now the problem is obviously now in this 85 millimeter, I'm not seeing I'm seeing too much. So you can do it as you want. I'm not really going to spend all this time. A lot of features. If I wanted to, I could also just, as I said, I could actually take the plane here, and I could right click and I could scale it. You kind of have to be careful when you do this, but there's lots of different ways to scale it. I could just do it arbitrarily. You can also, with a scale, you can key it in, and so there's a lot of things you can do. It could be on just on one axis, whatever. The problem is now that I scaled it, the way that I had set up the tiling is all different. But let's go ahead and make this bigger then. And again, there's a lot of features that I'm just going over really quickly, but let's go ahead and say here, all right? So, I'm okay with that. Again, if I was trying to make this perfect, I'd select my camera. I could also move this circle up and down. I think it might lock into place, so you have to be careful once you attach the camera. Sometimes you lose those features. And then again, I have a 65 millimeter. If I wanted to open it up a little bit, I could type in, 60. It's really up to you. All right, so there it is. Your materials are up to you. Obviously, your textures. And so let's go here. Now I need to render this. I need to make it a movie. Now, it does not default to a movie mode here. So what I do is I go to this render setup, and that's typically the icon is a teapot. And I think I minimized it, so it's one of these. Let's figure out where I did with this thing. So let's bring this up. And all right, so that's the materials. Let's do this again. So render setup. All right, there it is. So it's defaulting to what I did before, which is fine. But we don't want to do a single frame. We want to either do range, which means that if I could stop this right now, it's only got 100 frames. So think of this as a movie. When you go see a movie, think of it as a bunch of JPEG images, and what they do is they splice them together. And so 1 second is typically, depending on the resolution, it's typically 24 to 30 frames. So here's 100. I really have about a little over 3 seconds. So it's going to be a very quick movie. Now I could add, right? If I wanted to, I could add this to 1,000. There's things you could do to make these movies go longer, but let's just stick to this for now. And then the second thing I need to do, so I've changed it so it's doing more than 1 frame. And then what I'm going to do is I have to change it, because if I would render it now, I would actually generate 100 JPEGs, and it would not sequence. It would just, so what I need to do is make this a movie file. And so there's a lot of different formats you can do. I'm just going to stick to what I know works best on here, which is an AVI. AVIs are typically kind of larger resolution, and so that's okay, because larger resolution images, there's more quality there. So higher, bigger the number. And so I'll go ahead and save this. Let's just save this as another version. And I want to show you a couple things that can happen. All right, so I'll say save. One of the issues that you may have happen, I'm just going to use all the default things in here and just say okay. You may notice though that sometimes when you render, and I've already changed this, you just want to make sure that you're rendering. I'm using this Quicksilver hardware. It depends on your video card, but it can affect your sometimes you'll render and it's just black. So make sure that you look on here, and if it's not rendering properly, that may be it. Other thing that happens quite frequently is you'll render it and you're on the wrong frame. And so make sure you're in the 3/4 frame, and I think you can actually set it here. So you've got this we want to do the camera is what we're doing. So you can select it manually here. What happens is you'll probably end up it's too bright, it's not bright enough, so you'll go ahead and render it, and then you can cancel it and fix it. But let's just go ahead and go render here, and let's just see what's happening here. So I'm going to render it now. This is going to take some time. It depends on the math coprocessor, because what it's doing actually is calculating the shadow on every of everyone. So it can take a while. You can also network them so that you can have a lab and it'll use all the processors. You can actually render it through the cloud. You can pay for services. And that really depends on the resolution that you're doing. So it takes a while to render. The funny thing is, when I started doing this years and years ago, one JPEG rendering would take about the night. You'd be at work, you'd hit render, you'd come back the next morning. The point that I'm trying to make is it never is fast enough. You're always, for example, when they made the Toy Story with Pixar, the renderings took months, and it was like thousands of computers. So, now that's on one computer, but it's still, you always feel like it's never fast enough. All right, so I'm gonna just pause this, and then we'll wait for it to be done. All right, so I've rendered it. Now I'm going to go to where I saved it, and it's default as an AVI. Now there are multiple different software that you can use to open these things. I'm just going to do the default one. But one thing you want to look at is when you have it open, it generally will stop, but because it's a full circle, if you come to repeat, and most of them have that feature, it'll repeat. Remember, this is a very quick little rendering. It's 3 seconds, so you can also slow them down and all that stuff. But they're great ways to do presentations, to take your AutoCAD file that was just a generic lines and splines and make it into a very nice presentation. So that is the lesson. You've completed the 3ds Max animated, in this case for the chair.